What's a political hill you're willing to die on? 100% this. Publicly funded elections, no individual donations, no corporate donations, no PACs. All elected officials must divest their stocks and other speculative assets and place all their money in a blind trust of companies that manufacture goods in the USA. Corruption and the appearance of corruption should be treated on par with crimes like murder, rape, and assault. Everyone's first priority should be accessible, quality education, because otherwise nobody will even understand the issues, let alone making informed voting decisions. I am firmly convinced that if we all woke up tomorrow with a perfect education system, in another 30-50 years we would have the beginnings of real effective solutions to most, if not all our problems. I would go as far as anything you don't want in society should not be profitable. You don't want crime, therefore prisons shouldn't be profitable. You don't want sick people, therefore healthcare should not be profitable. You don't want illiterate people, therefore education should not be profitable. If people are making money off something wrong with society, they will do everything they can to keep that wrong alive. Yeah, even a stubborn fucker like me can't help but admit that we need to do better. Like, I love Lando's V8 cars making wicked pulls down to 1/4 a mile. Electric cars are fast as fuck too when they're electric sports cars, but they lack that satisfying roar going down the track. I know I will bitterly and stubbornly hold on to mine as long as possible when we really do start phasing these out, but I also know it's for stubborn and self-satisfying reasons. When you quote Spock's "the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," and look at this shit rationally, you know what needs to be done, and we need to be a lot more green than we are. The two-party system is the natural result of politicians and voters making optimal strategic decisions in a system with first-past-the-post voting. Proportional representation for parliamentary bodies, like the Senate and the House of Representation, and ranked choice voting is known to fix the problem, both in theory and in practice. You get other problems, like having to form a coalition government in order to reach a majority or giving a voice to fairly extreme parties such as UKIP. But countries with these voting systems do have more than two viable parties. On the whole, I think these problems are fairly minor compared to the profound theoretical problems with first-past-the-post voting. There is a movement in the US to adopt ranked choice voting, usually on a state or local level. Adopting it on a nation level would require a constitutional amendment, so I don't see that happening anytime soon. The U.S. government has no power or right to abolish private ephemeral conversations via backdooring or prohibiting encryption, no matter what its rationale. So many of my politics have changed in the past several decades, but I will die on this hill. Secure encryption, to the extent that this is possible technologically, is an individual right, and governments which infringe it ought to be defied and subverted, even if it causes social problems, even if it supposedly makes us less safe. I support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution guaranteeing a well-defined right to privacy. One more. Civil asset forfeiture, as it currently is superstitious legal voodoo. It should not be possible to seize assets before a guilty conviction, and this business of naming property as a defendant is an ugly absurdity which constitutes nothing short of tyranny. One of the things that define totalitarianism is the lack of a private life. Basically, your public life and your private life are one and the same. In a totalitarian system, if you break the government's rules in your own home, you will be caught and punished when your own children or family members turn you in. Or, yes, when you're caught by one of your own devices spying on you. You can't have freedom without privacy. I'm a Christian. I also believe this. Not all people of even the same religion believe in the same stuff. Many Christians, for example, don't interpret the Bible in the same way. So why should we allow some of those Christians to enforce laws? And the same Christians that are good with the church controlling the government would lose it if an Allah we trust was on the US dollar. It's hypocritical. Scientist here. While I get what you are saying, I will point out doing science is always political on some level because people are the ones doing science. and everyone has their subjective opinions on how to best do things. However, my bet is you mean something like the scientific consensus shouldn't be political. I'll agree there for sure. I know too many people who claim they like science, but in actuality just like trivia facts because they'll just ignore whatever they don't agree with personally, as if the universe gives a damn what you believe. I used to work in a corporate position where I'd have to hire temp laborers every other month. We had one guy, great guy, very funny. He was 28 and we were his first ever employer. Found out it was because at the age of 17, he'd been sentenced to 10 years in prison for a non-violent marijuana charge. Fucking ridiculous that you can take away such a big chunk of someone's life for something so stupid. I 100% agree with you. However, one thought always comes to my head. How are we going to do that? People like Pelosi, McConnell, Biden, who've been in Congress since 87, 84, and 73, and others won't just give up their seats. Any attempt from a politician to get rid of career politicians will get shot down. So in order to do that, that politician might have to make it their career in order to do that, then making them what they want to destroy. So, it has to be up to the people to make it happen. I strongly disagree on this. Being a lawmaker is a skill, and if you still have the approval of your constituents, then you should be allowed to run. There is also not insignificant evidence that term limits will actually increase the influence lobbyists and special interest groups hold, because you will have a political class of lobbyists with significantly more governing experience than the members of Congress. Thus, when new lawmakers have questions or need guidance, rather than turn to leadership, they will turn to lobbyists. Ask yourself why you'd go into politics. It seems to me the options are: A. Because you want to serve the people and improve things. B. Because you want to fight change, and keep things exactly as they are because you believe them to be right. C. Because you want to make money. It seems to me that while A and B are both honorable, only A serves an ever-changing social landscape, and yet all we ever end up with is C. You are allowed to oppose 1 or 2 or 50 policies and philosophies of your selected political candidate and party. Likewise, you are allowed to subscribe to 1 or 2 or 50 policies and philosophies of the opposing political candidate and party. You are not two-faced. You are not a traitor. You are not a Nazi or wokey. You are open-minded. Yeah, that's a big one. And even better if our politicians were to adopt this practice. I think it was 20 or 30 years since a bill had been passed that had a majority of both parties voting for it. Since then everything has been passed by one majority. Politicians used to go back and forth, and the difference between the two parties, and variance within, were larger. The American political duopoly is ruining our country, and making it an us versus them space, where you are shown to hate your political opponents. I was super excited to rank my ballot for the first time in NYC this year. Unfortunately, a minor bureaucratic mistake resulted in a miscount of the initial, and unofficial, tally. The result of that mistake, we didn't have first-round results until a few days later than expected. A lot of people are up in arms blaming ranked choice now, and I'm worried this inconsequential snafu may have fucked up any potential for it being implemented statewide here, as well as it being used as an argument against ranked choice elsewhere. I feel like Congress and/or senators need term limits, but I think they need like 10-year terms because passing or removing a bill seems like it could be a skill one needs to learn from experience, and a term of only 4 years seems really short, especially since a lot of bills seem to be more than what they look like on the surface. Having Congress and senators rotate out more frequently does things that would make it much worse and open the door for greater corruption. First, it removes any chance of deep institutional memory. There will never be a senator or congressperson that has been around long enough to see a bad bill come across, get passed, then repealed, and then have a similarly bad bill come up again. They won't be able to warn younger people if they aren't allowed to be around. Second, it further shifts power to the party and to private interests. Lobbying groups and party leadership outside of Congress, Senate inherit that memory the government lost. They also can have an even greater control over who runs where and their funding, backing in those races. Think it's bad how easily bought a politician is now? It gets much easier if that congressperson doesn't have a senior peer to ask and has to rely on a lobbyist or their part leadership for guidance. Finally, and what I, very subjectively, find to be the worst, it becomes government dictating who the people can vote elect to represent them. Have a phenomenal senator that aligns very well with your ideals and values? Too bad. Gotta elect whoever the party props up to run, or hope they have someone they endorse as their protege and they stay true and follow in their predecessors' footsteps. Where previously you could continue to elect your favorite candidate, you're stuck hoping and guessing. Is this candidate going to be as good? Are they going to keep their ideals and values when they see how corrupt it all is in person? Term limits work for the presidency as it is supported by a bureaucracy that maintains institutional memory. It's an office with a single person holding a lot more power than any one senator or congressperson. I'm all for nuclear power if the economics work. Nuclear power requires tremendous upfront investment of which return on that takes decades, so it basically can't happen unless governments are footing the bill. I don't think SMRs are a solution to the economics either. If they were, that would be reversing economies of scale. Thorium is awesome technology but again, doesn't solve the cost issue. I'd love to see a much higher percentage of nuclear in electricity grid mixes, but it's not realistic in the short term. Safety, environmental issues often claimed for nuclear power are nonsense though. I'm definitely with you there. The thing is, college prices aren't inflated just because of their high demand. Federal student loans mean that almost any student can get a loan to pay for an expensive college, which means schools can get away with charging tens of thousands per year. Before, students had a harder time getting such big loans so the colleges couldn't charge such high prices. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any students. The short-term, easy access money from federal student loans is one of, if not the, main factor in the wildly inflated college prices. As a guy who went to university for the first time at 29, the sheer number of young people just coasting through without any idea or care as to what they want to do was shocking and horrifying. What a waste of everyone's time and money. Profs even have to teach classes around the fact that probably more than half of their students simply don't give a shit. Telling fellow students I worked until I figured out what I liked about work, and then I figured out what careers put those skills to use, and then I went to uni with a laser focus and a lot of give a shit, resulted in more than a few people I met dropping out. Maybe this is a weird brag. Dental and eye care should be part of medical insurance, and not treated as separate. Have an ENT problem that is affecting your gums and teeth, too? Sorry, bud, not my specialization. Go see a lesser practitioner whose separation of discipline is rooted, pun intended, to a time when your dentist and barber were the same guy. People who denounce all politicians as equally evil and corrupt are either uneducated on the issues or looking for an excuse to lazily remain uneducated. It's one thing to be a cautious skeptic or to see the inherent corruption of a system, but it's another thing entirely to eschew nuance in order to be a lazy spectator. No one political party or politician is going to be perfect, ever. You may see any and all standing parties as unfavorable. You may be thoroughly disenchanted with the system, but as long as you refuse to participate in that system or, worse yet, refuse to admit any relative strengths, weaknesses among current options, you are contributing to the perpetuation of the very systems you dislike. Progress rarely if ever comes quickly and dramatically. Progress is a boulder we slowly push up a mountain, through perseverance even in the face of setbacks and momentary weakness. Progress also does not move in a straight line. It's happening or can happen even if you don't recognize it on a daily basis. That doesn't mean you walk away from the boulder that your friends, family, and neighbors are still trying to push. Decrying every public figure as equally terrible and invariably irredeemable isn't an opinion that comes from a discerning eye or a deep pool of information. It's a way of burying your head in the sand, where your complaints will only be heard and validated by others with their heads buried. I typed up a whole response to an out-deleted question about whether vaccinations fall under the umbrella of bodily autonomy. I don't want to throw away my comment like that user did, so I'm posting my response under your comment. Question: not trying to be a troll, but does bodily autonomy include the right to abstain from vaccines? I'm vaccinated FYI. My answer: I suppose one could argue that that is a right. However, I would argue that if a person wants to participate in certain aspects of society, then vaccination is a condition of that participation. For example, you don't have to drive a car, but if you do, you'll need to satisfy certain conditions: register the vehicle, pay for insurance, wear a seat belt, don't drive if drinking. That one could be called a bodily autonomy issue. Skeptical, and abide by all the other laws of the road, but you do have the right not to drive. Religion needs to stay out of politics. There is no need for prayer or saying, "Our thoughts and prayers are what's is." Your religion is yours. There is no need to bring it up to the rest of us. Thoughts and prayers do nothing. Action does. Also, your God or whatever you choose to believe in should have no say in my body, my love life, my education, and how I choose to live my life. Medical assistance in dying, MAID, aka assisted suicide, should be open to all people of legal age, no matter their medical condition or prognosis. If I'm a 20-something with depression and MAID is accessible openly to all, I can have such an open and candid conversation with my doctor. That, in turn, could lead to them crafting a less terminal treatment plan. However, if I should so desire, I should still be allowed to end my life as I see fit in a respectable and dignified manner instead of hiding away and killing myself by barbiturate overdose or the Home Depot method. $8 worth of duct tape and the garden hose and I can end it in the parking lot with a running automobile. Brexit is the most incomprehensible stupid decision since the First World War. That was the most comprehensively stupid decision of all time. There isn't any extra money for the NHS, which suddenly is short-staffed because we rely on foreign-born staff. The red tape hadn't magically disappeared. In fact, it is far worse. We aren't free. In fact, the government is passing legislation that takes away fundamental rights such as peaceful protest. The supermarkets are running out of food. That wasn't Project Fear, and the Northern Ireland issue wasn't fixed in the course of an afternoon. It's funny, I've met a couple people who align to different political parties than myself who I've had a couple political discussions with, and while we'll generally disagree on a lot of things, it always ends pretty amicably or uneventfully, in person anyway. Political discussion online is one of the 9 circles of hell. But when it comes to people that are close to my beliefs barring just one thing, that's when shit gets out of hand quickly. I've almost lost friendships over what was effectively semantics. There are 2 that I have. Second Amendment rights shall not be infringed. For the record, I am fine with background checks. That does not infringe on my rights. Yes, the ATF should be a convenience store, and not a government agency. Nuclear power, specifically 4th-generation nuclear, is the answer to our energy and environmental issues. I specifically like LFTR, liquid fluoride thorium reactor, IMSR, integral molten salt reactor, LCFR, lead-cooled fast reactor, and the PBR plus TRISO, pebble bed reactor /W tristructural isotropic particles. So many people are against nuclear energy, yet they could not even tell you in basic principle how even a second-generation PWR nuclear reactor works. I used to be one of those people that said radiation and nuclear waste is bad, so it's a no from me. Until a late-night YouTube video from Kirk Sorensen made me start questioning what I knew, and I found out I knew less than Jon Snow. Ignoring the current top comment because that should be everyone's top priority. Guns. No greater equalizer for minorities versus the majority or people versus its government, Every argument against guns can also be used for guns, and 2020 plus 2021 has shown that even the police and government are completely incapable of understanding the most basic knowledge behind firearms and how to care for them in America. Everyone should at least consider it, because I guarantee you for every responsible and safe gun owner there is another who just doesn't give a fuck. If you got your vaccinations, you'd be a good gun owner.